Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I am immediate past president of the City Club's Board of Directors. I am very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Jim Clifton, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Gallup, Inc. Mr. Clifton, an expert on opinion, comes to the City Club podium at a time when strongly divergent opinions are being expressed in Washington in connection with the debt ceiling and deficit issues. As citizens of a vibrant democracy, we know that opinions and the freedom to express them are vitally important. Of course, informed opinions are better than uninformed opinions, which goes to the City Club's mission of educating, informing, and inspiring. So there couldn't be a more appropriate time than today to have as our speaker the chief executive of an organization that, under his leadership, has grown from a U.S. polling organization to a global organization with approximately 40 offices in 30 countries. On the important issue of opinion, I would note that Gallup's website states that, quote, Gallup has studied human nature and behavior for more than 75 years. Gallup's reputation for delivering relevant, timely, and visionary research on what people around the world think and feel is the cornerstone of the organization, end quote. The website also includes links to current hot topics, including the deficit, 2012 election, presidential job approval, Afghanistan, Greece, Africa, unemployment, terrorism, and more. Mr. Clifton's vast knowledge and experience, including on issues of jobs and competitiveness, will be evident today. He has served as Chief Executive Officer of Gallup since 1988. In addition to significantly expanding Gallup's reach and operations, Mr. Clifton is known for creating the Gallup Path, a model utilized in performance management systems worldwide. He is active outside of Gallup, serving on several boards, and is chairman of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. He has received honorary degrees from Jackson State, Medgar Evers, and Bellevue universities. I am very pleased to present, on behalf of the City Club of Cleveland, Jim Clifton, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Gallup, Inc.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here. We just had some small conversations, and sometimes I do this, and sometimes I'm very sorry for it, but the notes I was planning on talking about, I've just changed them a little bit. So I just want you to know, if there are times you look at me and you say, gee, he looks lost, that's because I am. Yeah, we can take a poll and figure that out. They told me to talk just for exactly 25 minutes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay some kind of reckless thoughts on you, and then they told me to leave 25 minutes for reckless questions. So that'll be our promise. I'm not going to say anything about the election right now because I'm going to talk a little bit about job creation, but we could pick those up in questions if you would like. I wanted to make one remark. I just kind of coming into Cleveland this morning that I was thinking about that I thought maybe would be helpful for you as leaders. So I've been CEO here for 20-some years, but I've had the same job my whole life. So I've been an interviewer and a pollster and all that kind of thing. And we poll in the United States nightly, and then we poll ongoing in 160 countries around the world. So on a good day, if you said to our scientists, what's the world thinking, they've got a pretty good idea. So maybe a question you would have right now would be, well, you're here, what the hell are they thinking? This is important. I got to lay this on you just right because it'll seem subtle at first. But our founder, Dr. George Gallup, had a thing that he did, and he would mathematically describe the great American dream. And so over the years, the great American dream tended to be to have a family, peace, pray to a God, and have freedom. The reason that that's important is because that's the state of mind, the sociological state of mind that gets us to about where we are now. There's been a change in there. And this is important if you're a leader in this town like y'all are here, regardless of what you lead. But what it means is that's been the will of 300 or however many people there have been up to our 300 now. That's been what's been in their heads. And so then as a leader, you need to serve those things, or you're not serving the will of the people, and that's what keeps us free, and that's what makes America great, and all those kind of things. Here's the first thing I wanted to lay on you. That will has changed recently. So the sociological need, job, peace, God, family, all those kind of things, has changed to, you want to guess? What do you think it's changed to?
Money?
No. What?
Entitlement?
No. No. I'm glad I came here. Those are all no's. Thank God I'm here, Paul. What? No. Yeah, who said that? Okay, his lunch is free. Get him a buy. He won. He gets a Corvette convertible. The great American dream has changed from all those things to having a good job. So what are the implications? The implications are gigantic. So here in the United States right now, when we ask how many people want a job, the answer is 150 million. Half the people want a job. Now when we say, do you have a job? What's unemployment right now? About 9? No, I think it's, yeah. Now, by the way, you got to know this about that number. Do you know that if I've been looking for a job here in Cleveland and I just give up, I can't take it anymore, I just sit in my apartment depressed? Did you know that the United States government doesn't count me as unemployed? I'm not in that number. Seems like I should be to me. One of the things that Gallup asked, so we shadow. So the unemployment is created by the United States government with 60,000 interviews a month. It's not counting receipts or anything like that. It's done by a survey. Gallup shadows that. So we ask people that say, I've quit looking, would you like to have a full-time job? And they say to us, of course I want a full-time job. Okay, so they're not counted in the 9%. So let's put them right here. Did you know that if I go over and mow Luis's yard, and takes me 1 hour, just an hour, and he pays me $20, and I'm an engineer that's out of work, the U.S. government counts me as employed. So when Gallup asked me, how was that, mowing Luis's job? Is that the job you want? Hell no, it's not the job I want. I'm an engineer. I want to be an engineer. The United States government counts me as employed. That's important to know. If you put both those numbers together, do you know what number you get? 20%. So when you see 9%, just look at that and say, that number's not true. It's 20%. So now let's do the math. You got 150 million Americans that say, gee, I'd sure like a job. Full-time job, 30-plus hours a week. 20% of them don't have it. That's 30 million people. So the great American dream is to have a good job, but yet we got 30 million people that don't have a good job, which means it changes their relationship with the United States of America, their family, their friends, their neighborhood, everything in the world. My relationship with my God and everything else changes. So the next thing we ask them is, have you given up? Do you have hope to get a job? 60% of those people say, I don't. And so if you said, what's the very worst state of mind a human can be in the United States, it's actually hopelessness. And you said, what makes them hopeless? It's not having a job and not having hope for a job. So 150 times 20 is 30 million, and then 30 million times 60% is 18 million. 18 million is a gigantic number. It means that every one of us, everybody in this room, including me, we're 1 degree away from somebody that's out of work and has no hope for a job or is experiencing historic hopelessness. That's the worst part of it. The best part of it is we have a different relationship with our jobs. So if you look at young people and you say, what's different with them? They have a different demand for a job. Just a little bit before my time, people were salary men. Sorry, ladies, but there weren't any men. Everybody wore matching hats, had cigarettes. You know when you see a Yankees game from back in the old days? Remember everybody, it's all men, they all look exactly the same? Everybody got about $12,000 and that was it. You had no mission, you had no purpose, you didn't care about that job, you just went in and did whatever, you fill out some stuff, move it aside, whatever it was. But see, now clear at the other end of the spectrum is something very different. And these young people that you see, when they come to work, they're asking a different question. Remember, I moved clear to the other side of the ladder. And that is, this job, Jim, that you're going to give me, exactly what kind of a contribution am I making to the world, to my city here in Cleveland, whatever it is? Because if I can't see how I'm making a significant contribution, then I don't want this job. But what, just a minute, Jim, it pays a lot. Well, that's great and all that. But first of all, there's a new demand because of that sociological shift, and that is that job has to have importance. I wanted to tell you that because the biggest problem this country has is joblessness. Here's something else. And at Gallup, we're not political, you know. We don't work for Democrats, Republicans, and all that kind of thing. And I'm sure we have people that lean way left and way right here. Here's something that you need to, that's a offshoot of this. The single most important social value is not abortion. It's not gays. It's not war. The new social value in this country is having a good job. That changes absolutely everything. You know, whether or not President Obama gets reelected, it's not going to have anything to do with gays, gay marriage. It's not going to have anything to do with abortion. It's not going to have anything to do with war. And if you go back not very far, remember when Bush ran against Al Gore? That was interesting to me. They were about the same. Remember they'd get up and debate and they didn't really have anything to debate against, to debate about? A little bit about gay rights, I think, was a big one. I don't even remember who I voted for. I do remember waking up in the middle of the night and they said Gore won. You know, I remember, I didn't really care. They seemed about the same to me. That seems fine. Got up a little bit later and it turned out Bush had won. I don't know about you. I didn't care about that one either. And it goes down to the Supreme Court in Florida. They said it was Gore that won. Came back up to the Supreme Court in my town. They went, no, it's Bush. Nobody went in the streets. Nobody had signs. Nobody had anything. We went, well, yeah, whichever. Let's get back to work. You see what I mean? But now everything's very, very deadly. Because a job, and remember, war is off too. You know where the troops come in, 20,000 more, 20,000 out. That's clear down. So the Gallup poll says, here are what are the most important things in your life right now? War has moved clear down to like 1%, down there with all the other social values. But it means as leaders that when we look at our to-do list, whatever we run, whatever we influence, whatever we teach, if we don't put at the very top, what's the relationship of these activities to jobs and to the role jobs play in people's lives and their identity, will never get this country to come back. So that's point one. I don't know about you, but I haven't had trouble sleeping I'll be 60 in August. I haven't really had trouble sleeping my whole life. I didn't come here just to tell them that. I wanted to share that with them and get it off my chest. But I've never really, you know, as CEO, I haven't worried too much about the company and all that. I've been hearing some reports that make me think now, and in the middle of the night. I'm pretty sure the Chinese are coming to get us. Now, I don't mean to overreact here or start some kind of a crazy thought trend, but are you watching what left-leaning and right-leaning economists are saying about this? You know what our GDP is right now? What's our GDP? Huh? It's getting pretty close to, let's call it 15 and make it easy. 15 trillion. When Gallup asked the public who has a bigger GDP, the United States of America or China, do you know what most of them tell us? They say China does. Well, that's a lot to think about. I mean, the Gallup poll, I mean, we're just doing our job. We're saying which one, but that's mistaken. That's wrong. You know what the GDP of China is? Yeah, let's call it 6. It's 5.8. Now it's 5.8. It counts a little bit if you give credit for me trading a chicken for coal or some kind of thing like that. But let's just call it 6. Here's a problem. That 6 trillion is growing at 10%. And our 15 trillion is lucky if it's growing at 2%. We are way out ahead. So if it was a football game, you know, we're ahead 30-0 or something like that. But when you put the math to GDP, so that's who has the gold rules, right? In 30 years, our 15 is lucky to turn into 30 trillion. If you put, let's just use 8.5, we won't even use 10, on 6, China's goes clear up to 70 trillion. So it's not too paranoid to make a case that the leader of the new free world, or whatever the hell that would be, sort of free world, is China, not the United States of America. Because the size of the economies are so different. And if you think money doesn't count, you're watching a whole different movie than I am. Now, I tell these young guys that I always tell them that one of the things about being old is I've seen more than they have. But this is about a little over 30 years ago. I was watching TV, and some economists came on. They were both liberal and conservative economists, left-leaning and right-leaning, a long time ago. And they talked about how Japan and Germany's GDP would eclipse ours in 30 years. At that time, we were at about 1.5. It was a pretty small number. What they said when they did their math is they said, right now, 30 years later, Japan would be at 5 trillion. And they said Germany would be at about 4. And the United States would be at about 3.8. We were going to be at third. I don't know why nobody, Luis, if you go to business schools, nobody teaches this. There ought to be a chapter. You know, they teach about United States saving the world in World War II. Nobody talks about the next war. It was against Japan and Germany, but it was a war for our lives economically. And we were supposed to take third. I never understand this. Why didn't somebody jump up and go, holy mackerel, we can't take third in this race? So now here we are 30 years later. Remember, we were supposed to go like this and we were supposed to be here. What happened was the United States bowed clear up to 15 trillion. Can you imagine that? I mean, for the business you run, if your sales manager came in and said, I got some good news, we outperformed by $10 trillion. That's what the United States did. Now, for you people that like math, if you take 30 years and take the stubs of how the United States performed, that's the baby boomers. So when Tom Hanks and Tom, the anchorman, talk about the greatest generation, the ones that followed re-won that same war, but not kinetic, economic. But if you add the stubs over 30 years to the performance we had economically compared to where we were supposed to be, that number totals 100 trillion. Now you finally have a big number. But if you said, what caused us to build this economic empire? Now remember, the whole world's GDP is 60 trillion. We're 25%, only 300 million out of 7 billion. We're 25% of the whole damn thing. We built an economic colossus, and although the odds makers in Las Vegas had us as prohibitive losers, we won the playoff game of our lives by I don't know what, 80-3. So you say exactly what happened, because you know why? I'm looking around to see how old everybody is. It's like what Yogi Berra used to say. It's deja vu all over again. Because we went through 30 years, surprised the world, built an economic empire, I mean, bigger than the Roman Empire as far as how to affect the rest of the world. But now here they all are. And these are people that love America, but they say all this is going away. So a good question is, what exactly happened that last 30 years that caused us to have a surprise $100 trillion where we could build unbelievable infrastructures and universities and education systems? You know, our universities are still, I mean, sometimes people get down on the public schools, which is there's kind of an odd dichotomy in there. They're really doing pretty darn well. But our university systems, nobody's close. If you take the top 100, more than half of, in the world, half of them are here. The whole world's crushing to get here, which is great. But our technology build out, you know, although they're just canceling a lot of the stuff down at NASA, I mean, we have kicked the world's butt with the space race. Well, yeah, that's because we had $100 trillion to do it. We kicked the whole world's butt in the medicine race. Well, we had $100 trillion to do it. You know, our military, you know, China's still 20 years behind. Russia's got nothing. But, you know, we spend more on defense than the next 50 countries do added together. God, that is a lot to think about. I guess the objective over at the Pentagon is that at any time we can, if we have war, that we can win in the first 24 hours on 3 fronts. Does that mean if it was Russia, North Korea, and I shouldn't say names, let's say Canada. No, I shouldn't say Canada. I'd like to withdraw the word Canada, please. But it's total annihilation. So you say, as an American, what does that cost? That costs $1 trillion a year to have that capability. You know what the GDP? You know what the GDP of Russia is? $1 trillion. The whole damn thing. We spend more on military than they have money, even from their oil and everything else. They're probably at 1.4 or something like that. Same thing's true with India. India's got over 1 billion people. Their whole GDP is about the same size as our military budget. You see what happens as China takes wins more of the GDP, all of that stuff comes unraveled. So our infrastructure, sociologically, almost everything changes. So how do we have a comeback? I just want to make a quick point. I'm watching the clock because I'm supposed to stop in 8 minutes, and then we're going to go to questions. But I want to lay a reckless thought on you. Nobody in their right mind would say this, by the way. So are you sure it's okay if I tell this group? Because I don't want to. It's free, but I don't want them to leave the room. Is that possible at this point? No, I want to make one quick point. I think that the United States of America can come right back and win again. Here's the deal. The math on this is in 30 years, the GDP of the whole world, so think of it as sales. If you run a company, it's the sales. The sales of the whole world will be $200 trillion. That's what it is. Right now it's 60. It means that $140 trillion of new stuff is coming in. Sales, jobs, markets, David, equity, all that stuff's coming in the forms of $140 trillion. If you said to me, what do we do to remain leader of the free world, I'd say we got to get the majority of that $140 trillion. We got to get at least our share. We got to maintain a 25% share or at least 20% share, or everything changes. If you said, how do you do that? I would say we got to change our emphasis from innovation to entrepreneurship. It's really important. I also want you to be open to this fact that there's a gross oversupply of innovation and an incredible undersupply of entrepreneurship. But if we don't get that right, we're not going to get this comeback to work. Here's another thing. Innovation is not that rare. And you got to go work on this, because if I'm wrong, I want you to prove me wrong. But if I'm right, we got to change a lot of things that we do. What's really rare is the entrepreneur. our scientists went in their labs. I said, don't come out until you tell me how many there are in the United States. I want to know how many really unusual people like Steve Jobs there are who create organizations with market caps bigger than countries. They finally came out and they said it's 3 in 1,000. Do you see the point? They're really, if you can go find them. I'm going to tell you just a really quick story. The guy that invented the internet's a guy named Vint Cerf. You ever heard of him? A lot of people, yeah, of course. But he had invented all that stuff right there in DARPA. He didn't even know he had. Vint's a great guy, but he had no idea. I mean, he'll tell you right at dinner, he didn't have any idea what he had there. That's probably the biggest piece of that comeback that we had over those 30 years. Here this guy's sitting there in the defense lab. What he'd done is he'd built fiber optic and spun it around the world so in case something's blown up over here, he could still keep talking and all that. That has no value to our country. Vint Cerf's, I mean, really unbelievable invention. I mean, if you're going to say the wheel, fire, whatever it is, flight, I mean, Vint's got to be right there. But you see the point? It has no value as far as creating jobs, equity, and that until there's a customer standing next to it. So anyway, he's sitting around there, and he'll tell you the story. And one day a guy came over from the U.S. Senate and said, what is that thing you made there? By the way, do you know who the guy is from the U.S. Senate? Huh? Al Gore. It is. It actually is Al Gore. So I always say, you know, if you're going to give a guy a Nobel Prize for something he really earned, if they wanted to do that over there, that'd be the guy right there. He said, what are you doing? And he said to Cerf, you know what we had to do? We had to throw that out into commerce, see what they can make out of it. With God as my witness, Cerf said to me and our CIO, I didn't really see that value in commerce, but I said, yeah, fine with me. Gore goes over to the Senate and makes a thing called the Gore Act. And you could argue that conversation, then it went into commerce, then of course Microsoft and Intel and Oracle and everything spun out of there. And the magnificence of what American entrepreneurs did with that, if you just wanted a simple explanation of what saved the country last, you probably could just say that. But see how important it is? I gave a talk recently over at Academy of Sciences, and they had the presidents of those really good, like NIH, I don't know, whatever you would call them, the labs, NASA and wherever else. But I asked them, and they wanted me to say that we're putting too much on to these guys, which was kind of a cruel thing to do to me. But I said to them, how many of you have inventions in your laboratories now that need a customer and could become colossal breakthroughs? There's only about 40 of them in the audience. Every one of them raised their hand. One guy had to talk. I said, what do you have? And he said, I don't know if he was president of NASA or NIH or CDC or what it was, but he said, I honest to God to have an invention bigger in my labs than the internet. It just needs enterprise energy to kick it off. I was going to give you just a quick example, but this is why we've got to be careful as Americans. We've got to change all of our strategies. We've got to think about jobs. We've got to think about entrepreneurs. And we've got to develop people as fast as we can. I think Wayne Huizinga might be from Ohio. But, you know, here's an example. He's a garbage man. What do you have to call them? Garbage managers or something like that, garbage directors. But anyway, he had a truck. So one time he had an idea to start a bigger garbage company. That's a bad idea. Garbage gets picked up pretty well. We don't need that. Well, anyway, he makes it into waste management, you know, a really famous green, environment-friendly, great place to work and all that big. But he created a Fortune 500 company and I don't know if Wayne graduated from college or what, but, you know, God blessed him with some kind of different neurons. But very few people have done that, build a Fortune 500 company in one lifetime. Well, anyways, next idea, which was worse, I did some of the research on it, was to rent videos in storefronts. You know the name of that one? Blockbuster, yeah, another Fortune 500 company. Neither one of those, and I don't have time to tell you, so I got to get this thing over so we can go to questions, but the research, it wasn't that good of an idea renting those films. But he built another Fortune 500 company. Nobody's ever built two. You know what his next idea was? Selling used cars. Where are these ideas coming from? That was his third Fortune 500 company. But you see, what we do right now is we look at what Wayne did and we go, oh my gosh, that was a good idea that he had. Are you sure? I did the initial research for Ted Turner on 24-hour news. 24-hour news is about as good idea as telling bankers back in the old days, you got to keep your banks open past 2 o'clock so people that have jobs can actually use the damn things. That's kind of what Ted's idea was. It wasn't that great of an idea. But you see, he makes it into a fantastic, rich mission purpose. But these stories go on. But you see, the ideas aren't that good. What you have is you have unusual Americans that find an idea that's the host. But it's a lot easier for us as leaders to work with the innovation because it's more controllable. The messier, more mysterious thing is the entrepreneurship. But unless we find that, I think that our worlds are going to change very much. If we do, I think we'll come back and win the war of our lives, which is a jobs war that'll play itself out over the next 20 years. It's a great privilege for me to be here. I read the list of, you guys have a heck of a thing going on here very much, but thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday Forum featuring Jim Clifton, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Gallup. We will return to our speaker in a moment for our traditional City Club questions. We'd encourage you to start formulating your questions now, and please keep them short and to the point so we can get as many questions in as possible. In 2012, the City Club of Cleveland will celebrate its 100th birthday. We are planning a number of events and will be actively soliciting support, that includes money, through our campaign for a new century. Our one-year celebration will begin this coming October 10 with a conference on free speech at the Allen Theater here in Cleveland. To learn more about the 100th anniversary events, please visit the City Club website, www.cityclub.org/100. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of our many radio stations across the country. Our television broadcast partner is WVIZ PBS IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC, and our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. We are very pleased to welcome guests today at a table hosted by Medical Mutual of Ohio. Thank you very much, Medical Mutual, for your support. Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is City Club Program Director Kerry Miller. First question, please.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. My question relates to the correlation between decisions that are made affecting this country, jobs, and most notably looking at the Gallup World Poll, in which there is a large section dedicated to work and jobs. Out of that will come suggestions and opinions that are to be converted into action. How would Gallup propose to hold accountable those individuals for carrying out those suggestions and opinions?
I'm going to try to answer your question because I think I understand it. I might answer a different question. If I do, I'm sorry. A breakthrough that we've had, let's just call it job creation or GDP growth. It's a mistake when you're trying to hold people accountable to look at the United States of America because national programs don't work. And I mean that just as a researcher. And the reason I say that is because there is enormous variation of performance by city. And so if you're going to hold somebody accountable, you really need to hold them accountable by city. Now, okay, the number one city in the world just 40 years ago, that seems really recent to me, and the richest per capita city in the world 40 years ago, rich in art, entertainment, music, was where? Detroit. Yeah, Detroit. Detroit was the richest city in the world. San Francisco and the Valley, they didn't have much cooking at all. It was unsafe. You lock yourself in the hotel and all that. Think of the difference in those performance of those two. Detroit has failed the United States of America, allowed Germany and Japan to beat us in cars because they listen to customers better. Where San Francisco, you could argue, saved us. Think of the variation in performance there. I don't know why this is that way. Albany is the capital of New York. Austin's the capital of Texas. Albany's dead. Austin is just is unstoppable. There's no reason that things should be in Austin. It's hot, it's desert. There's got to be scorpions. I'm from Nebraska. I don't know desert, but snakes or whatever. Why would it be? The reason is really simple. It's leadership. The researchers love twins separated at birth. Here's two, Sioux City and Sioux Falls. You tell me the difference. Founded about the same time, on the Missouri River, agriculture, or even named this about the same. Sioux Falls is a fantastic, growing, white-collar research, medicine, all sorts of things. And that's Sioux Falls. They're even pretty close to each other. Same highway goes by them. Sioux City's the city from hell. You go there for peep shows and bad gambling, and I don't know what else. But the question is who runs those cities? And if you look in all of those cities, there will be a set, and there is here in Cleveland too, of somewhere between 10 and 20 tribal leaders. And they'll be historical families, philanthropists, whatever, that love this town. And if they're not involved and engaged, it's really hard to move. But I would hold those people accountable. They have more money, they have more access. I'm sorry to pick on this, but then let's take the city council. God bless them. Thank you for giving it all you got. But the city tribal leaders have more money, have more speed, have more connections. They can get things done fast. My simplest answer to your question, this would be anywhere in the world. Probably we're all Americans here in the room. But we have to fix America one city at a time. And it's got to all come back to that group. And whatever they're doing in Cleveland, it's not enough. Whatever they're doing in Omaha, that's a pretty good city, it's not enough. Whatever they're doing in San Francisco, not enough. Obviously, Detroit's a mess, but every one of those groups has to be held accountable to take, especially job creation. And when I say job creation, that's business starts, and there's about 6 million small to medium-sized businesses operating right now in the United States. If you say, where exactly do jobs come from, we need 1 million new ones to start. Right now, there's only about 500,000 starting, so that's a real problem. That's where jobs come from. The other place jobs come from is of that 6 million, 5% of them will take off and become something big. But those local leaders need to be held accountable for the job growth, the GDP and job growth, kind of like the chicken and the egg. I don't know which one comes first. Nobody does. But that's my answer.
Thanks for coming. The unemployment rate in the 90s was, early 90s was high. In fact, in the 80s, 82 to 85, it was well above where it is today. In fact, in Ohio, it was 14%. In the 70s, it was low. It was high in the early 70s and in the 60s. So why do you think there's more concern about jobs today than there has been in the past every decade since the war? Is it a matter of opportunity, expectation? If it's true that people regard that as the number one, what's behind it?
I heard two questions there, but you say one reason I think that it's different is because the jobs are more gone than they used to be. They're real gone. And so before, when we would have a lull, those same jobs come back. That's not happening this time. That's one thing. The second thing is, and this is, I don't know if this is boring or not, but remember, one of the reasons that we got that last rise in GDP here is because banks loaned 10 million Americans $3 trillion more than they could pay back. It turns out that's a lot bigger number than the trouble we were in before, right? So bankers always get whipped for lootiness or being reckless or whatever. people always forget, they offered loans that people shouldn't have accepted. We always kind of forget about the people that shouldn't have accepted them. But so the money is a lot bigger. That's one thing. The second thing is that when you're out of a job, you are more out of a job than you've ever been before. And so the pain not only is deeper, but it's different. Okay, that's one answer. I think the second part of it is there are 7 billion people, and this is why the future looks really deadly to me. I mean, we can navigate through it, but it's much more deadly. There are 7 billion people, 5 billion adults. Of the 5 billion adults, we ask on the world poll that you mentioned, do you want a good full-time job? Of that group, 3 billion say, that's what I want. I want a real job in the world. 3 billion people want a real job. The number of real jobs that are available in the world are only 1.2 billion. That means it means that you've got 1.8 billion people that will take a job that an American will have for maybe $2,000 a year. Because remember, 3 billion people right now live on $2 a day or less. So if you said, what's going to be different about this is that we're more really out of jobs, bankrupt jobs, than we were in the past. Those aren't coming back, but we also have 1.5 billion people that really want that $140 trillion that are coming in. So it's not that it's worse, it's that it's different. That's my answer.
Well, thank you for some interesting insights. You told us the story of Windsurf and Internet and Al Gore. And then you also made a distinction between innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, my question is, we have a couple of major innovations that are here today to be developed, solar power and wind power. What's standing in the way of transforming those innovations into entrepreneurship?
My short answer, sir, would be the individuals. And so I think you can just pour more money and more money and more money into all that stuff, into innovation, into wind, all that. But until you put a rare entrepreneur on it. And by the way, the things that we found that are really different. So out of 1,000, there's 3 in 1,000 that God, I don't mean God, but you know, but somehow are wired differently by chance or by God or whatever you need. But when one of those finds. See, Henry Ford, we're kind of in car country here. When Henry Ford found cars, nobody thought that would work at all. Remember, he didn't invent cars. But it's sort of like the moment when IBM said, well, nobody will ever use laptops. Because that should have been an IBM. They threw it out, and of course we found. But what's different about the 3 in 1,000 is that they have 2 attributes that are really different than the normal man or woman on the street. One is that they have optimism that's unusual. There's a CEO that I work with. I mean, his optimism isn't just 3 or 4 times more than ours. It's 1,000. God, he can hear the worst problem in the world. He's just on the next thing. And he's not trying hard. He didn't go to some motivation class. Nothing receives it. I don't know what the hell the deal is. But here's the thing. Optimism by itself doesn't predict. But if you have unusual determination, when those 2 overlay, then you can start to predict an unusual entrepreneur. But I think if Steve Jobs, who, as we were saying here, that's a promoter, not an inventor. If Steve Jobs would have picked energy, things might be really different. But somehow we've got and he might be the most unusual entrepreneur of the last 100 years, I don't know. But somebody like that's got to find wind power, has got to help with I mean, a non-combustion engine would be great, but we might find it costs too much or whatever. So you'll need somebody like Henry Ford to figure out: are we really going to pay $100,000 for an all-electric car? But I think that it's the really valuable American is the unusual entrepreneur. Then you and I've got to create a host for him and tell him, this is your host. It's wind energy. Let's give that one all we got. Then give them the money and the things that they need.
With respect to your polling techniques, how do you ensure racial, ethnic, gender, socioeconomic diversity and sort of a general diversity of thought?
Well, I'm going to start answering a question. If it's off, then you kind of go like this, and I'll try to fix it. But when Gallup does a poll, the whole trick is for it to be representative. It means that everybody in the country has an equal opportunity to be chosen. The closer you get to that, the more accurate your poll. So you might do a sample of 10,000. You go, oh boy, that's a big sample. But if you used a list that was only farmers, then you go, well, it doesn't matter how big the sample is if everybody doesn't have an equal chance. So then we go through this meticulous thing where we spin the numbers, and so it picks up cell phones and all of that. And then we interview 1,000 people, and this is the standard Gallup poll. So every morning when you get up, we've done presidential approval, confidence, unemployment, and all that. So if you go to www.gallup.com, you can see that on there. But the trick is to have the sample near perfectly represent. So let's say that there are 12% black, 14% Hispanic, 1% Muslim, 2% Jewish, or whatever. So that's the way the United States is. When we do our jobs right, our sample is like a mini community of them. And then if you do 1,000, the range of error is about 2 or 3 percentage points. And if you go clear up to 10,000 or 100,000, you see what happens is if you only do 100, the range of error rattles like this, clear out around 10 or 15%. Then you do 500 and it goes like this. Then you do 1,000 and it's like this. But 100,000 or 1,000,000 doesn't get you much more. So if you can do 1,000 right, that's why we do 1,000 a night. Now we roll them up so it's 365,000 a year. So then you can watch the trends. I'm gonna make this real fast so I don't bore you. But in Iraq we interview 30,000 Iraqis a month. And we pick the sample from satellite because you can see all of their homes. And there's so many in-person people, they drive out. And so what we do is we come to this household, then we sample. That one's been picked. So the interviewer drives out there, and we go, it's sort of eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And then we go, Luis. We go by age and people in the household and all that. So we go, is he here in the house today, here in Kirkuk or somewhere? And they go, no, he went down to buy a goat or something. When will he be back? He'll be back pretty soon. Our interviewer just waits. And so then when he comes in, we give him that interview. Here's what you have to know. In the Middle East and Africa, we have no refusal rates at all. So somebody goes and they say, hey, Luis, get back there. There's some guy from the Gallup poll wants to interview on a whole bunch of really wild stuff. He comes running back, and we can interview him for hours because he's... but just, you might be interested in this, but if anybody ever says to you, when Gallup does a poll in Iraq or Egypt or somewhere or in the United States, which one is more accurate? The answer is Iraq. Because in the United States we have something called non-response bias, which is people that hang up on us. And so that you can't, it's very difficult to correct for that. Where in Iraq, you don't have any problem. You have no non-response bias at all, because once we get there, they go, yeah, Luis is coming right back. He'll be ready. Or he's right there. But see, and we won't interview you, because if we interview one of you three, then we came off the natural selection of him at random. So if you said, is there a magic to polling? There is. It is that when it's when the formula, or the algorithm, whatever it is, picks him, If you can get him, and he doesn't hang up, or you don't have to move to somebody else, the polling has incredible accuracy. So that's...
Back to jobs. I think you're perfectly right that local leadership is very important for economic growth and job creation. My question is, what do you think the role of the federal government should be? And secondly, how do we out here get those guys and girls in Washington to pay attention to jobs and not charades?
You know, that's the million-dollar question. I mean, if somebody doesn't answer that, our train truly gets derailed. But I'm going to just turn it a little bit. You got to remember, we live in a democracy and a republic. A lot of this is about us. So I would say, first of all, we got to make damn sure we're not looking to Washington saying, how are you going to fix jobs here? Because if I was president, I was advised, I would look back and say, you got to fix them yourself. What can I do to support you? And that's one thing. When you so we do an ongoing poll of small and medium-sized business, thousands of them. We track that across the United States. And by the way, that's where all the jobs are, right? Big companies create no jobs at all. And most of the jobs are within that 6 million companies. That's our Army, that's our military. So goes their confidence. When those turtles stick their heads out, they hire more people, they open new markets, buy advertising, they get psyched up and all of that. When they're not psyched, they just stop. And that's where we are right now. I would tell Washington that you need to create an environment where they feel like sticking their necks out. And if they did that, then I think jobs would come back very, very quickly. One thing is, free enterprise has got to have a positive attitude. If we don't have a positive attitude toward free enterprise, I don't care what you work for, everything else stops. We can't all work for the government. We can't all be a city, county, state, and federal workers. There's a percent that's got to be that's the right number, and those got to be great employees and all that. Free enterprise has to be a real colossus here. So the first thing I would say is, are you guys doing everything you can to keep the image high of business? And the answer to that is no. It couldn't be worse. The image of business is the lowest that we've ever had it. That makes these young kids not want to get in business. It makes them say, I want to do something important. I don't just want to make shareholders rich. I think profit is bad. It means people are looting. When you have that attitude, the train is off the track and our country's in a lot of trouble. Somehow Washington had better turn that around. That's one thing. The second thing is that entrepreneurs tend to drift or tend to go where opportunity is high and barriers are low. And we all read the same stuff. You look at Texas. Texas has very low cost of entry. They have very low barriers. And so entrepreneurs flood to Texas. And they don't go to California unless you're going to the Valley. But everywhere else you don't go. So if the federal government can help support having low burdens and high opportunity, I think that would help a lot as well. But this is just my theory. I think one of the reasons we're so attracted to innovation is it's much more controllable. So you can build a building, put a bunch of PhDs in it. This is what Saudi Arabia does. $5 billion for the Innovation City. I don't know if you've ever been there and looked down there. There's nothing going on in that thing. That's not going to work. But see, here's what we can do. If you have 1,000 students, you know what educational psychologists can do? They can rank order them 1 to 1,000 on IQ. And be really accurate. So smartest to dumbest, they can do it in here with us. But see, what you can't do is you can't rank order us by optimism and determination or entrepreneurship or whatever. The government's got to get real serious about where this comes from. It comes from an American spirit. I sound like too much of a capitalist now. I can hear the Star Spangled Banner playing behind me right now. Can you bring that music up? But even freedom might lie within that. But unless we stoke that back up, that starting a business, you can become your own boss, and we won't have job startup, and we won't have takeoff. So, but I think they've got to be air cover, and I think cities have to be the solution. But that's the $200 trillion question.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to a Friday forum featuring Jim Clifton, Chairman and CEO of Gallup. Thank you very much, Mr. Clifton. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.